Well, why don't we move on to our what just happened segment? As always, there's like far more things that have happened since you and I had a chance to talk like this than we have time to talk about here. But we're going to focus on one in particular, a recent study from Wharton. So tell me what the study's about and what did we learn?
Sure. So, every year for the last 3 years, really since ChatGPT hit the scene, Wharton and the GBK Collective have put out an adoption report to tell us broadly what's been happening in large enterprises in the U.S. So, essentially, they survey 800 U.S. senior decision makers across various functions and senior levels in enterprises that have over 1,000 employees and over $50 million in revenue. So this year, the study was conducted between June and July in 2025. And the big takeaway is Gen AI has now moved from an experimental phase to what Wharton is calling accountable acceleration. So we have moved from an era of experimentation and exploration to really AI is now a mainstream across enterprises, large enterprises in the US. And 82% of these executives now report using it weekly. And by comparison, when they first started doing this study, only 37% of executives in 2023 were using it weekly, which is a huge leap. That's over double by my calculations, although you are the high school calculus star, Bridget. So you could tell me if that's accurate math. But what are people actually using AI for? The top three use cases were data analysis, document summarization, and document editing and writing. The money that organizations are actually spending on AI, about a third of the investment that these large organizations are spending their money on goes to new tech. One of the interesting takeaways from the study is that about a third of their investment is going to internal R&D. So companies are realizing that they really want to be building their own in-house custom solutions. And then about a third of the remaining investment is going to training and their existing systems in-house. One of the interesting takeaways is that these enterprises are reporting that there is major return on investment happening. 74% of survey respondents reported that they are seeing positive returns already, and 82% report that they expect payoff within 2 to 3 years. And if people listen to our podcast regularly, or they follow the AI space regularly, or they just exist in the world and see headlines, they'll recall that this summer there was a lot of buzz about an MIT study that said 95%, I think was that the
Yeah.
number,
hmm
uh, pilot projects are failing and there's zero ROI on these pilot projects. So this study really counters that, saying that most organizations are actually seeing ROI and that most organizations are actually formally measuring ROI. 72% have formal metrics to measure ROI, which the Wharton report says shows that AI adoption has reached a stage of maturity in US enterprise organizations and global enterprises.
It sounded like there's some difference across, different industries, like, not surprisingly, tech and other digital kind of industries are seeing significantly more positive ROI than some of the, industries that rely on more physical, work, like retail, which isn't surprising, but that kind of segregation of the industry data, I don't think we saw in the MIT report. So this study feels a little bit more robust than the MIT study, which isn't to say that there's not conflicting information out there. I'm sure there is, but this one feels pretty robust. Anyway, sorry to interrupt. It also had some information about the ways in which, people are learning to make the most of it and also still struggling, right? There was some information about that.
Yeah, there's also a divide in how people in the organization are perceiving their own organization's progress, with senior leaders being very optimistic at their organization's progress. 56% of senior leaders say their organization is making very quick progress, with middle managers, 20 only 28% are seeing significant progress on the ground. And I think that probably is a reflection of the fact that managers are responsible for training people who are actually doing the really hard work of integrating this into the real systems on the ground, where it's very difficult to figure out how to integrate AI into systems that existed in a pre-AI world. They're dealing with training people day to day who have had jobs that have not required AI integration. They're dealing with all the human friction, which the study exposed as the really difficult part, the next phase of AI acceleration. So that's kind of not surprising. um, there's also a paradox that the study exposes, that 89% of survey respondents say that Gen AI enhances skill development, but 43% worry about skills declining because of the ability of AI to actually do a lot of the work that used to add to people's ability to build skills. Interestingly, the survey also exposed a declining confidence in training alone being sufficient to advance the workforces that are in-house in enterprises, and an increasing reliance on hiring for people who have skills and bringing them in-house to augment the workforces that are in place, where I think a lot of the conversation in 2024 was about upskilling the workforce that you have. And the last thing that I'll say, and then would love to hear your thoughts on the takeaways from the study, is the emergence of the chief AI role, increasingly as part of the C-suite, sort of showing that AI is not going anywhere, and the focus of somebody whose exclusive role, or in addition to their other duties, will be structuring and continuing and sustaining AI as part of the mandate of the organization going forward.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting kind of across the board to see what felt to me like more progress than I expected to see at the enterprise level. I maybe because my most of my interactions are with law firms or legal departments at enterprises, and you've heard me say many times before that in-house teams do seem to be further along than some of their outside counsel, some law firms, in terms of how they're finding value in the technology across their workflows. And like, some of that makes a lot of sense. They are cost centers at their enterprises, so they're always being asked to find ways to shave costs. And now you have a technology that kind of allows you to do that. Um, but I still was kind of surprised by the by how quickly it seems that we're seeing positive results across large enterprises. It also made the point, I think, somewhere in the study that originally, the sort of smaller startups and, like, nimbler teams were moving faster than large enterprises, and that gap seems to have closed. That
Or
also surprised me because I always think of, that taking longer than it seems to have taken, according to this particular study. But it's interesting for lawyers who, have clients that are these enterprises, right? It's, important information, I think, for legal professionals to just be aware of, that if the world is or the world of your potential clients or your actual clients is, moving quickly in this direction, there are probably gonna be new things that they're gonna want help with, new legal challenges as a result of using this technology that they'll want advice and partnership around. And it's I say this all the time. There are going to be all kinds of new legal workflows created by this new technology, and so I don't think it's a reason to be, worried about the future. I think it's a reason to plan for the future, but the future's gonna need lawyers to think through all of these new workflows, so.
Yeah, absolutely. I was also surprised at the sort of exponential growth in ROI, like reported ROI and tracking of ROI. I've not seen as much of that in legal. Um, and the optimism and the integration of AI that these organizations report, and I think we're still in a really messy period of trying to figure out what that means. It seems like every report that comes out has conflicting information in it. So, it's hard, I think, to suss out still what's happening, but it is encouraging to see structure being put up around these efforts. I think particularly the chief AI officer roles that are being created, at least to give some focus to the efforts that are happening. I would imagine, sharing best practices and figuring out what's working well through those roles can help organizations really navigate what's happening. One thing, and I can't remember whether it was this study or one of the other ones that we've looked at, that stood out to me was that organizations that explicitly frame innovation as a goal of AI integration are making more advancements than organizations that are only focused on efficiency and productivity gains. And when we do presentations and ask, like you and I frequently will open with what's your greatest hope or fear about AI, almost always one of the biggest hopes is exclusively efficiency gains, and I rarely hear, and we present to mostly legal audiences, I rarely hear, like, transformative innovation in the way that we do things. Um, and so you are a leader who has a team that has worked around thinking about it differently. So I wonder what your takeaways were from that.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, like, it's the oldest story of, every big tech integration, right? At first you see there are just the hobbyists, like, there's, like, the weird guy over in the corner who's using the technology, and you're like, "Okay, whatever." And then there's, the folks who figure out how it can bring us efficiencies, and that gets almost everybody on board because everybody likes efficiency. Who doesn't like efficiency? But I've been saying it this way recently in presentations that you kind of need that step to be able to see what the transformative use cases are, because once you have those efficiencies, then all of a sudden you have more time to be thinking about what else can we now do, I don't you've probably heard me say this because I'm sure I've done it with you in many of our presentations together, but the when the movie camera was first invented, all anybody used it for was to record plays, and that's great because more people got to see the plays and the people who couldn't make it to the theater, and that's, like, really cool. But then they were like, "Oh, wait a minute, we can cut scenes and add effects," and, like, it the new art form, um, wasn't obvious for some time, all people saw that it could do was just bring efficiencies to the old art form. So I think the new art form always comes a little bit later, and I think generative AI is exactly the same. Like, I mean, we're gonna see it across not only art forms, but industries and, entire ways of working. But I do think we're still in this period of finding efficiencies to give us room for seeing what could come next, right?
Yeah, and your analogy of the camera and filming plays has made me think of lawyers refining their emails that someday we'll think of, we had this transformative technology and that's how we started using it. But I do think that we're crossing a Rubicon now where it's like it will be hard to remember what it was like to sit with a blank email and
Yeah.
write it from scratch, and that is the beginning of something more transformative.